So welcome to Forward Enterprise Services. As I mentioned, this is going to be a webinar, pretty much an introduction to web building, highlighting some resources, as well as maybe some tips and tricks. It's also a space for you guys to ask questions that you may have around building websites. Before we get into that, I want to just quickly speak about Forward's Enterprise Support Services, which is a 12-month tailored business support program to help individuals that are thinking about becoming self-employed, either in that pre-startup or first year, kind of 12 months trading. We support individuals that are in England. They could be ex-offenders or maybe going through recovery from addiction, as well as individuals that are from kind of low-income families or not in employment, education, or training. And also just generally those that are facing other barriers. This service is completely free. So if you are thinking about becoming self-employed and you need a little bit more support, feel free to kind of reach out to us after the call. I'm just going to post in chat quickly the sign up link there, so that if you guys do have any questions, you can kind of sign up and apply to our services. It is very much an application, so we will be kind of review your case, and either myself or my colleague, thank you, Tev, and my colleague Stephen, who is unable to join us today, will kind of assess your case and see if you're a good fit for our services. It's basically the offering that we have is one-to-one business support with enterprise coaches. We also have a limited pocket of microgrants that you can apply for, and we'll talk about microgrants later, and that's up to £1,000 to cover startup costs. We have online business boot camps, and I've seen two familiar faces from our boot camps, so it's really good to see you guys kind of joining in more of our sessions. As well as we do kind of online workshops, we have a mentorship program, as well as masterclasses and networking events like this one here. Just a bit of an overview of today, short introduction to me so you guys know who you're talking to. We'll have a bit of a quick quiz at the start just to get everyone settled in about some of the facts around web building. And then we'll focus on what is the purpose of web building, an introduction to things like web hosting, domain names, and in the chat earlier, we've had some really good suggestions from people already. And then we'll look at some web building tools, what's out there, what's easy to use, pros and cons, as well as website security, which is a really important one. And as well, website encryption, because that's one people tend to forget about when they're building their website. And then towards the end, it'll be a bit more design focused. So, layouts, how to optimize your website so that it can load quicker on mobile and generate you a bit more leads with what you're trying to do. So really the purpose of the masterclass is, which has already been highlighted already, starting off with web building. If you don't know where to look, can be a bit of a minefield, and I really get that. A lot of businesses will lure you in with cheap or free, and then by the time you've kind of got going and you're kind of locked into their services, the prices starts racking up a little bit there. We've had some examples of that already. So I've been through the exact same journey myself. So, I really want to kind of give you guys all the basic information, explain some of the jargon so that you can go into it knowing exactly what you need to look out for and what you need as part of your website. Just a quick poll. The poll feature isn't active at the moment, so just 1 to 5 in the chat, please, from everybody. I'd like to put on some maybe other masterclasses in the future. This one's been really popular. The attendance has been really good today. So if you could just pop in the chat either 1 to 4 on some of the examples there that you'd like to see a webinar on, or if there's something not included, please pop that in the chat as well. So I'll give you guys just a couple of minutes to have a quick read and to pop some of your thoughts in the chat there. I can see those coming through now. Brilliant, thank you. So a couple more minutes. Thank you everyone for chucking them in. Hopefully the ones that haven't just yet are are just kind of thinking, and I haven't put everyone to sleep this early. So fingers crossed we'll get some good responses. We've got lots of 1s and 2s coming through. Brilliant. Some good comments there from Adam. Tev, would you mind just kind of having a quick look and letting me know kind of what's the most popular one whilst they kind of filter through? Very good question, Jake. Thank you for highlighting that. Jake has quite rightly asked, what is SEO? SEO stands for Search Engine Optimization. And what that means is when you type into Google a specific word or phrase, so you could type into Google smoothies, you're looking for a smoothie or smoothie recipes, Google will give you websites that are associated to that search. And what we call that is kind of search engine optimization, which means the better you can optimize your website for search engines, the higher you will appear on the search results. So thank you for that question there. That's really useful to highlight for everyone.
Okay, so not sure if everybody has put in the chat their reference, their preference rather, but to be honest with you, it's really quite diverse. One, originally, the introduction to SEO seemed to be the most popular, but now we're moving away from that a little bit, and it seems to be quite a mixed bag, to be honest. Social media seems to be quite popular. I would say that's second in line. But yeah, introduction to SEO seems to be, at this moment, the most popular, with social media a close second.
Brilliant. Thank you, Tev. And thank you, everyone, for participating in that. What I'll try to do, knowing that you guys are a bit interested in SEO, I'll try and kind of add some SEO points and tips as we go. I am mindful of the time that we have for this session as well. So thank you all for that. We'll keep you updated on future events. And as I mentioned earlier, stay tuned till the end, because I'll be sharing a link and I'll show you how to use it shortly to get you guys access to a free online WordPress web building course that's run by PodTech. And we'll kind of talk about the microgrants in a little bit more detail as well, and how you can apply for those. So a little bit about me. If you come to my events and we do icebreakers, you'll notice it'll always be about food. In kind of 2014, 2017, I ran 2 restaurants in Cardiff, and they were called Sorrento's. We did burgers, we did milkshakes, and it was really, really successful. After working kind of 110 hours a week, 7 days a week, I was, as you can imagine, incredibly burnt out, and decided to kind of sell the restaurants and fly to South Africa to try something new. I didn't know what I wanted to do, so whilst I was kind of on the plane, I learned about shark attacks in South Africa and how they were attacking surfers. So I decided that I was going to set up my business researching a shark repellent. So this is where I started learning websites and how to build them, and used a free page builder, which I'm not going to mention, and kind of launched my website and started marketing it. Quickly realized, which is what has been touched upon already, that website builders, they often lure you in with cheap or free, and then by the time you want to either push your website live or use your own domain name, the prices slowly started going up, and I was paying ridiculous money for this website by the end of it all. So that's the real focus of this, is about giving you guys a bit of direction. I was out there for about 3 years, and then I decided to come back to the UK for personal reasons. And I literally landed back in the UK with a rucksack with about 2 t-shirts, a pair of shorts and flip-flops, and nothing but my laptop. So pretty much the nomadic lifestyle. And I quickly realized that obviously I need some income, and I didn't know what I was going to do next. I so far hadn't used my very, very useful BA honours in fine art degree to any use. So I decided that I was going to look at some kind of design aspect of things. I really enjoyed building websites for my own brands and digital marketing aspects. So I decided to start learning a little bit more about what I would say is the kind of the more professional web builders out there. Again, straying away from coding because coding is really useful to have a good understanding, and it can help you tweak your website, but it can be a very slow process, a very long process. And for those of you that don't know what coding is, it's HTML is an example of that, and it's just basically computer language. Joe, who's just introduced himself on the call, Joe very much is what I would class as an expert when it comes to coding. He studied that at university. He's got a degree in that now, but it takes a long time to learn it as well as to build using it. So page builders are a much quicker, much more accessible way. As we all know, dreaded COVID-19 started in 2019, and I quickly realized that maybe some of the excluded communities that were running micro businesses wouldn't have the skills to take their business online. And from that, I started a nonprofit called PodTech, and I'll quickly talk about them before we move on. And it was just basically giving people free online e-courses, webinars, and literally doing tutorials from my setup at home, trying to get as many people online and as many businesses going in the new digital world. When lockdown eased, we ran a pilot for about 4 months, and we trained in person 60 entrepreneurs to build websites. And a lot of those websites are still running today. And this, again, was free access for those individuals. Some of those were just looking to learn new skills, to go into employment, to develop themselves, or maybe they were looking to set up a web design business and wanting to learn more. And others needed to use it as an e-store, sell products, those kind of things for their brand. We expanded our support into our PodTech internship pathway, which is a 3 months internship pathway for university students. And that's actually how Joe joined our project a couple of years back as an intern. And the interns basically built free websites over this period of time for some of the clients that maybe didn't have the skills or capacity to build websites for themselves. So that's a bit about who I am and PodTech and Forward Trust. So now I just want to get you guys thinking. We're going to go through these questions and I'll show you some of the answers shortly. So in the chat, or feel free to shout them out, would be really great if you're happy. How many websites do we think are out there in the world? A rough number. You can see all the gears turning in everyone's brains and everyone trying to think. A rough number. Go on, Keisha.
100,000.
Okay, that's a good number. Anyone wanna go higher or lower on that?
Like price of right for websites, I go much higher. I would say it's like many millions, if not a billion.
Okay, so millions to a billions. I saw Teb's hand go up. Go on, Teb. How many?
I'll move Jennifer on this. I think it's in the billions, to be honest with you. And I think Sam has put 3 billion and Andrew 100 billion. So yeah,
awesome. Yeah, there's a huge amount, and this is why SEO is really important. You know, your website will almost be like a needle in a haystack out there. So we need to build our website properly with SEO in mind, and that will help our website get seen. We'll look at the answer shortly. Roughly, what do we think the average costs are to pay someone to build a website? Give me a range of numbers. Anyone want to contribute some ideas there? I can see 600 million in the chat from the previous question. John's popped in 250 to 500. We've got 2K. Anyone want to shout out any numbers? You got 1K. Brilliant. Well, let's move on to the next one. Important question, and we cover it later. What percentage of web traffic, so that's people visiting websites, do we believe is on mobile devices? So give me a percentage. So desktop would be your computer, and mobile would be obviously on your smartphone. Adam, sorry, go on.
Guarantee. Oh, did you? Hands
Yeah,
up.
after you. No, it's okay.
Going to see guarantee whatever your number is, it's slow because your data lags. It's,
Okay.
and mobile data is trending, but I would say currently it's well over 50%.
Brilliant. So Jennifer's gone in for middle of the road, 50%. We've got 85, 60, 70 in the chat. So got a quite a wide range. Chris has said 50. Thank you. And then a really important one for you guys, if you're setting up your business, how many people are buying online every minute? Because there's no point in having a website if you know what that is the main point of having a business website, either to sell products or raise awareness of your brand. So how many people do we think in the world are shopping online every minute? Any suggestions? Chris has popped in millions. Yep. Anyone want to go any higher or lower on that?
I'd say hundreds of millions. To be
Hundreds
honest.
of millions. Brilliant. We've got 500 million-ish from Sam, and another 500 million. So keep those questions coming in. I'm going to show you guys the answers now. So here's just a few of the answers. So there are 1.9 billion websites in the world currently. The average cost of a website, unfortunately, I could only find stats in the US, so apologies if you're outside of the US. And that is ranging from kind of about $1,000 to $6,000, which is roughly around $800 to £4,700 for a website. So if you are thinking about going into web building, it's quite a lucrative business. 54.8% of web traffic is on mobile devices, and we're seeing that percentage increase year on year, as kind of, you know, as Jennifer, I think it was mentioned, as mobile phones get much more robust and more effective at streaming or visiting websites, or connection to Wi-Fi and data becomes more readily available, we're going to see that trend increase. 23% of small retailers still don't have a website in the UK. Sorry, in I think these stats are either in the US or in the UK, and that to me is quite shocking, because people do a lot of research online. They check out businesses to get credibility before they decide to buy. And around 6 million people are shopping online every minute. So, you know, how can we tap into that market for our brand? What is the purpose of a website? And you guys really need to think about this before you start building. I think it was Jim that said he had a request in for a website build, and you know, it wasn't really clear what they wanted from that website. You know, if you just go straight into it, guns blazing, trying to build a website, it's going to be confusing to visitors. You know, you need to have a focus around it. So here's just a few examples of what a website can be used for. E-commerce, it could be a showcase platform, price list, lead captures are quite useful for your brand, or just a simple business card. Here's just a list of alternatives, and please, guys, you know, chuck some alternatives in the chat as well. You know, let's help other individuals. You know, if you're wanting to keep startup costs low initially, you may decide to use some of these other platforms. There will be commissions, obviously, and there may be some sign-up fees to that. But I think it's always important to kind of think about these first, because these websites are going to get more traffic to it than your website when it's just starting off. So you may decide that you want to do a mixture of both, just as you raise your brand's awareness. So the main costs associated with web building, and there are others, but these are what I see as the kind of the main essentials, and that is a domain name. So that's the name of your website, and we'll talk about domain names shortly. You will also need to purchase what we call web hosting, and that's like the house of your website. It's where all that data lives, all that information on your website lives. And again, we'll cover that in just a second. And then you need something called an SSL certificate. I won't go into too much detail into this. We'll cover that shortly. It's really important for many reasons. So there are many other costs associated with web building, but these are the very core fundamental ones that I feel that you need before you even get started. So as I mentioned, web hosting is basically a fancy server. So it's like your computer, and it just sits in a nice, cool office somewhere. And this is where all your website information lives. So you rent this server space, and it's important to realize that you rent that space because servers are expensive equipment. You need a lot of high level of expertise to run them, as well as they're expensive to manage and maintain. So what people do is companies have these servers and then they rent that space out to you as individuals. One of the biggest server companies out there is AWS, which is Amazon. What AWS do is that they will rent those out or white label them to other brands, and then those brands will then in turn rent them out to individuals like yourself. And we call these static web servers. Don't really need to know the name, but that's the technical name for them. So when building a website, there are two main ways that we go about it, and I touched upon those a little bit previously. The first is hard coding, and that's writing your website with lines of code using kind of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And these are all languages that computers read. The second is what we call CMS, or content management systems. And this is what we're really going to focus around for this kind of webinar. And these are softwares that does all the coding for you. And most of the time it's kind of drag and drop onto the page and your website gets built. Low technical skills needed for CMS. CMS can be split into two main categories, I feel. There are others, but the first one is open source. And this means that the developers give access and rights to anybody to develop programs and software to work alongside their CMS. And the other one is closed circuit, which are kind of companies and individuals that kind of own the rights to that page builder, and no one else can build the software for that. And if we take away hard coding websites from out of all the websites in the world, Wix takes up 2.4%, Squarespace takes up 2.5%, Shopify takes up 5.4%, and WordPress takes up a whopping 64.7%. Anybody who, I know a few of you have heard of WordPress in the past or used it. Anyone got any ideas why WordPress takes up such a large market share? Anyone want to give us a guess?
I'd imagine it would be because maybe it's cost effective, cheap,
Yep.
and also easy to use. Is that what it is, really?
Brilliant. So WordPress, because WordPress is what we would categorize as open source, it means that there are a huge number out there of web host providers that can help you build your website and host your website with WordPress. And what that means is it's a competitive market. So you can get web hosting for really cheap and quite expensive. So that is, yes, one of the reasons why it's so popular. And we'll talk about the pros and cons later. And the reason why the other ones aren't closed circuits, so that's the other ones that are listed there, is that once you're kind of built into their system, you're locked in there. So if their prices go up, you can't move to another provider. So I've just done a really quick price analysis of these for you guys, just so you can get a quick overview of the costs. So we've got Shopify, we've got Squarespace, and we've got Wix. Shopify, if you've got low tech skills, Shopify is a really good platform to create an e-commerce store. The prices range from £24 a month to £259, depending on your plan. Most of you will be going down the cheaper end. And then they take a commission, which is about 2.2% plus 20p a transaction. And then I'd say kind of Squarespace and Wix are kind of the easier page builders if you're not having an e-commerce platform. And again, they're relatively cheap, fluctuating in prices. Unfortunately, I couldn't find any information on Wix's transaction fees there. I think they use PayPal from memory. So it would be, I guess, just PayPal standard percentage. But remember, with these individuals, once you build with them, you're locked into their ecosystem. So you can't take your website and move to another provider. They don't allow you to do that. WordPress, web hosts out there, there are loads. I've just included a couple here. So we've got SiteGround, Bluehost, and Google Cloud. I really love SiteGround. It's what I use for my own servers. Their customer service is amazing, and it's kind of relatively simple to use. If you're unfamiliar with that, the customer service team are quite good at helping you a little bit there as well. Joe's just posted in the chat some of the links to those companies that we've mentioned as well. So what we'll do at the end is we'll export the chat, and then you guys have got access to all of these links. But if you do feel that you've got a good level of skill, or you can learn quite quickly, try and go down the WordPress option. You'll get access to our WordPress course later for free, and it'll be much better for your business in the long term. So the pros and cons are closed circuit. So they're the ones that we've mentioned previously. Really easy to use, one-stop shop. You just kind of sign up, log in, and kind of everything's all built in there. All the programs and features work together quite easily. The cons is once you grow your website, the prices start to increase quite quickly. Or if you want to get additional features like selling online. If they don't have a feature that you would like for your website, then you're pretty much stuck. You can't have that feature if they don't provide it. As well as there are often a lot of hidden terms that you may not realize. So we'll talk about SSL certificates later, but my experience in the past with working with some of these is that they've attracted me in with cheap, really cheap web hosting for a month. And then I needed my SSL certificate, and that was almost double the price of what I was paying. So just bear that in mind, and hopefully you'll kind of learn throughout this webinar the things to look out for. Pros and cons of using open source programs like WordPress is that because it's open source, you've got developers all over the world creating amazing programs for WordPress, which means you have a lot more brains and brilliant minds working on a specific function. So a good example of this is there's a free program called Rank Math, which is an SEO tool. And that's a whole company designed around making your website perform better on Google. So of course, they're going to outperform any smaller companies that have a limited number of staff. Competitive prices, freedom of movement. So if you don't like your host, you can move to a new one. As well as the community is really passionate. So there's loads of Facebook groups out there that everyone will offer you free advice and free support to help you with your website if you face any technical problems. Unfortunately, there are the cons are that there's a bit more technical skill needed. And because there's so many developers out there, sometimes it can be confusing on which choices to go for. And what we've done in the course that you'll have access to later is we've boiled it down to the bare minimum programs that you need. So take away any of that confusion for you guys. And there's a little bit of management and maintenance needed as well. Here are some of the famous websites built with WordPress, really just trying to drive home how, you've got like Walt Disney, Rolling Stones, BBC America. And when I was doing this presentation over lockdown, I had the really cheesy joke of saying, well, the White House do it. So if Trump can build a website, then so can you guys. Obviously, he's not in office anymore, thankfully. But yeah, so, there's some really big names out there using WordPress websites. These are just some things to consider. Again, I'll share the slides with everyone after the course so that you can look. But the main things to pick out for is something that we call uptime. So, how regularly are there problems on these hosting platforms, which would mean that your website is down and doesn't appear. Website space, I'd say as a basic simple website, you're going to need between 2 to 5 gigabytes of web server space. So just bear that in mind when looking at different plans and prices. You want unmetered traffic, which is just the data that transfers from your servers. Some of them have monthly visits. So, how often can people visit your website? They could cap that at a specific amount. Something that I really like about SiteGround is that they offer you free security backups as well. So every day your website will automatically back up. So if you get hacked or your website crashes for whatever reason, you can revert it back to a previous day. And speed and performance, and then that SSL certificate that we previously mentioned. Domain names. Has anyone purchased a domain name before? I think a couple of you. Yeah, I can see we've got a few hands waving. Jake and Jennifer, brilliant. Would either of you mind mentioning who you bought that with?
I went with GoDaddy.
GoDaddy, yep. And Jake? You can't remember? Okay, brilliant, no problem. So GoDaddy is one that I do recommend in this. They're really easy to use. I would not recommend using them as a host because there's often data breaches with them, which means they get hacked, unfortunately. But a lot of the web hosting that we just mentioned earlier, those providers, you can actually purchase the domain straight through there. So, if you don't want all this faff around, buying a domain from here and a web hosting from here, you can buy it all in one place. It's relatively simple, and each domain name is unique. So we can see here, this is the Forward Trust domain name, and that's held in something that we call DNS servers, which stands for domain name servers, and they're kind of scattered all over the world. And those domain name servers basically point our browser. So when we type into Google or the address bar forwardtrust.org.uk, it then goes to this DNS server, and that DNS server goes, I know where all that information lives. This is where you need to look. So it's like the address of your website. So if you imagine web hosting, the domain name is the address. If you're sending a letter, and the web and the domain name, and the static web servers are the house where your information lives. So imagine it like you're sending a letter. Here are some examples of domain name servers providers. So GoDaddy, we've got TSO Host, 123Reg. And again, you rent these out for across the year, so ranging between £1 and kind of £14, depending on different web hosts there. There are different types of domain names. So we've got top level, which is .com or .org, and we have country code domain names, which is .co.uk. So other ones could be .au, .za. And then we have sponsored top level. So these are things like .gov. And this is how a URL will look. So you'll purchase this bit here. So you'll purchase, for example, forwardtrust.org.uk. Obviously, this one is taken. And this is your domain name. And then every page that you add or create will have what we call a slug. And this is the bit that adds at the end. So it could be forwardtrust.org.uk, and if you had a page about enterprise support, it would be /enterprise support. We talk about encryption later. HTTPS just says that this website is secure. So when deciding on a domain name, these are the things that you've got to think about. Is it appropriate to your industry? What about the length? Is it too long? Which domain name extension is right for your business? Spelling and grammar, and other characters to avoid things like numbers and punctuation. And please don't be rude or offensive, because it will just drive people away from your brand. Website security is really important and something to look out for. All of the closed circuit companies that we mentioned should have their own. If you're looking to go for an open source option like WordPress, then make sure that you've got a firewall on your server, and all of them will come with that. But then also what you want to do is you want to install a firewall onto your website. A program that we would recommend, which is really easy to use, is one called WordFence. And when you join our web building course, we show you how to install that, activate it, and make sure that your website is secure. And it's important to remember that there is no such thing as a 100% secure website. Every website can be hacked, unfortunately. So this brings me to the SSL certificate, and this is website encryption. This is a really important part of your web building. If you imagine it like how you would use WhatsApp, so when you send a text message on WhatsApp, the transfer of information is encrypted. And what that means is if anyone tries to intercept that transfer, they won't be able to decipher the information. Only people on either end can see that. And it's really important to have because, these are some examples here of how to identify. So, you know, when you open a little web browser, you'll usually see there's that padlock in the address bar, or that it'll say HTTPS rather than just HTTP. Why is it important? Well, you need to make sure that you're protecting your visitors' data on your website. So if anyone's putting in card details, anyone's putting in addresses, email, anything like that, phone numbers, if you don't have an SSL certificate, people can steal that information and use that however they want. Google, because it is consumer focused and Google is a service, and often people forget about that, Google actually downranks, so it will give you a bad SEO score, websites that don't have an SSL certificate, because it sees that as a bad, negative customer experience and wants to make sure that its visitors are protected in the best way. Again, it's important to highlight that you know, you need to install this before you build your website, because if you install it later, it is an absolute nightmare to fix. So always install that before
Simon?
you build. Yes, Ted.
Farhan has asked, how much does an SSL certificate cost?
Really good question. Thank you for that. Most hosting providers, or good web hosting providers, will provide that for free as part of your web hosting plan. You just need to install it before you start building. Not so good web hosters will lure you in with cheap or free. And then when you're in, they'll then charge you an absolute fortune for that SSL certificate, because they know that you don't need that to start building your website, but really you do need that for your website. You know, Bluehost, Google, and SiteGround, all of that is included free in their hosting plans. And I know SiteGround has 24-hour backups as well. So it's a really easy and really quick thing to do. We show you how to install that on your website. And it's literally a 5-minute job that will make your life so much easier. The next thing I want to talk to you about is called bloating. And what that basically means is it's a term that we use which makes your website load slowly. And the three main things to kind of watch out for, the quick wins, if you will, are using a reliable web host with good statistics, using not too many plugins or software, so keeping it to the bare minimum, and optimizing images so that they load quicker on your website. And I'll show you an example of how to optimize an image really quickly and the amount of memory we save. Bloating becomes even worse when you're using your mobile device, because as it was mentioned previously by Jennifer, it takes a bit longer for the things to load on your website. So, you know, if your website's taking a long time to load, you'll just lose traffic. People will leave your website and you'll get a poor SEO score. Here are a list of the 3 plugins that I think you'll need if you're using WordPress. So Elementor, essential add-ons for Elementor, and WordFence, which is that security program there. So let's have a quick look at images. We've got things like primary images. So these are images that you've taken yourself. And we have secondary images, and these are stock images. Google wants to see more primary images because it sees that as a better user experience. If it sees the same image it's seen on 4 other websites, it doesn't see that as a unique thing for that visitor. So you'll get a better SEO score if you use images that you know are primary images you've taken yourself. You can, of course, use stock images, but please bear in mind when using them, you check the terms and conditions. It's really important. So the things you want to look out for are, you know, free for commercial use, and no attribution required. And what that means is your business is allowed to use that image, and also you don't have to attribute the person that took that image. Okay. And Joe will just pop in the chat now some links to some good kind of free stock image websites that you can use. So we've got Unsplash, Freepik, and Pixabay. But always just double check the licensing rules there for that one.
Sorry to interrupt. So, are those websites that have just appeared on our the chat function? They're places that we can visit to use stock images that have been taken before by someone else without having to pay or deal with copyright and laws on permissions unless that image requires to do so. Is that right? Exactly.
Yeah. Brilliant. So I'll actually just show you guys one quickly now, just to highlight. So Pixabay is a really good one. Does anyone want to give me an industry that they're currently working in, just as a bit of a direction? We've got food from Joy. Brilliant. So we could just type in food to keep it specific, and it would give us high quality images of food that we could use. So say we we want some fresh vegetables, we could click that there. We can see here straight away that Pixabay, it's saying that this is free for commercial use and no attribution required. So we can use that on our website freely. I noticed in the chat there was one around music from Sam. Thank you, Sam. So again, you could type in music, and it would give you a range of kind of different images that you could use there. So have a little look at those links later. They're really useful. If anyone has any additional websites that they use for their own stock images, chuck them in the chat. Let's kind of share knowledge on that. The next thing I'm going to highlight is, if you are using stock images, image size is really important, because if you're using a stock image, the file size is humongous. They're designed to be used for printed material mainly. So the file size will be so big that you could print it on a wall. And the bigger the file size of the image that you're using, the slower your website will load. Now, Amazon believes that it loses $1.6 billion in revenue for every second its website takes to load, which is a phenomenal amount of money. Obviously, none of us have got businesses, unfortunately, at that level, but the same rules do still apply. For every second your website loads, you will lose a large percentage of your customers, because people are impatient. We're so used to having access to everything on our fingertips straight away that if it takes long to load, we just leave, we get bored. So if you're looking to download an image and you want to resize it, make sure it's the right size. BeFunky is a really good free online tool to help you resize images. If you've got Photoshop, I just chuck it in Photoshop and then resize it. If not, BeFunky is a free option. And then we want to optimize that image. So we chuck that into a program called TinyPNG, and that just optimizes that image. And I'll show you why it's important. So this is an image that I took off a stock image that I took offline. And we can see that it's like 3,441,041 bytes. This file is huge, it's humongous. And just by resizing it, I saved 87% of that file space, just by making it the right size of an image. And then what I did is I threw it into TinyPNG, and I managed to actually decrease it down to 98% of its original file size. And I'll show you how to do that now. So you come to TinyPNG, which is this one here. This is the original image. This is the resized image. And this is the optimized image. Can anybody see the difference in the quality between that? No. And we're saving 98% memory space just by doing this really simple task. So I'll show you how to do it. You just resize it, drag it into here, and it'll optimize it for websites. So it's optimized it down by 83% off that reduced size initially. All you do is you download it, and then you've got your image ready to go. So before building a website, oh, sorry, Jennifer, I can hear myself. Am I okay to just mute you? There we go. Sorry about that. So before you're building, what I would do is think about the layout of your website, get all your images together, optimize them all in one go, and upload them straight away. Yes, Jennifer.
Can you resize PowerPoint presentations and or PDFs?
I believe these are just for it's just for PNG and JPEGs, but you can still obviously upload them. They just work slightly differently. So if you are looking to have PowerPoints on your website, maybe think about optimizing the images that you're using in the PowerPoint first, creating the PowerPoint and then kind of uploading it to your website. It will in your website. Your website, you won't be able to view that because you can't really view PDFs or PowerPoints, but you can download them and open them in a new screen. So it wouldn't impact your load times really too much because it'd just be a file to download. Yes, Tev.
So thanks so much for showing us the process about how to kind of resize and stock images. Is this something that we could still do with images that we've taken ourselves?
A really good question, and yes, I really encourage that. The images that you've taken yourself on smartphones now, the image file sizes are getting huge. We're getting a lot of quality in there. So, yep, do the exact same process. Get all your images in one folder. Make sure they're the right size, and then upload them. Roughly, to give you guys an idea of file sizes, when you're resizing it, you want to resize it to what we call pixels, and that's just the pixels on your screen. So if your image is going to be the size of say, this banner here, you want to be making sure the file size is about, I don't know, 1500 to 2000 pixels wide. If your image is maybe half the size of the screen, you could get away with 900 pixels. And if the image is a small image like this, you could get away with about 400 to 500 pixels. So just think about where your image is going to be placed on your website and optimize it first, because the faster your website loads, the higher SEO score you'll get, the better user experience you'll have. It will take up less web hosting space, which means you won't need to upgrade your plan and pay for more space. So, you know, if I hadn't have optimized this image, I could have used my entire website plan very quickly. So it's about giving you the skills to make it more affordable for you guys. Website layout. So these are just kind of, now we're moving on to structure of the website and how things are laid out. So the things you need to think about before you're designing your website is your font and your typography. So if you've got a brand already, you know, feel free to, you know, please use your colors that you use your font type that you use in your branding and your marketing on your website as well. Creates that continuity. Color is really important, and I'll show you some cool color tools in a minute. Images, which we've just covered, really important. Use primary, secondary, and make sure you optimize them. Negative space is also really important. And that's the white area. So that's where there's nothing present. And it just creates harmony on your page. And then another thing you need to consider is, how do these pages connect with one another? So, and we'll look at that later. So typography, when you're designing a website, try and use simple, plain typography like this here. Websites are shifting more towards minimal. You want it to be accessible. You know, maybe someone has poor eyesight, or they could be dyslexic like I am, and cursive font like this can be quite difficult for them to read. Simple font and typography like this, it makes your website more accessible, easier to read, and what it does is it doesn't distract your users from your actual design of your website, so the images and the colors that you're using. So just bear that in mind. I'll quickly touch upon some SEO tips with writing text. Has anyone experienced writing text with SEO in mind? Anyone got any experience with that? No, okay, brilliant. So what we want to do when we're writing our content of our websites, the text that appears on our website, is that we want to use little brief SEO tips so that when Google reads our website, and Google reads it like a user, it's really clever. It reads it like a book, so it reads it from left to right and top to bottom. When Google reads our website, it can properly index it. So it can go, okay, well, this website is about smoothies. So I know when people are typing smoothies into the search engine, I can give them this website as a search result. And the better we do that, the better we communicate what the website is to Google, the more likely it is to offer up our website in a response to a search. And we use a very basic technique is to think about your text as a book. So use headings, use text bodies. So we can see in the example here, we've got the main heading here. So the title of the chapter, I guess, if you were reading a book. And then underneath that, you have like subheadings, which are these ones here. And then the text itself. Okay. And headings, we assign them titles. So we've got the H1 title, H2, H3, H4, H5, and H6. H1 is most important, H6 is least important. So if you're using an overall important title like this, we want to set it a H1 or H2. And then if it's less important, we can set it H3, 4, 5, and 6. Does anyone have any questions on that? Because I know it might be a bit of a confusing one. Yep.
So when you're saying about like writing the text, are you saying that it should be, if it's important, it should be bold so that's clear to read?
So good question. Oh, sorry, I can hear myself. I'm just gonna. Brilliant. So really good question. Thank you. So what we do is when we're building our website using a page builder, you will see in the page builder, you will have an option for what is called a heading or a title. And you'll see you'll have another option, which is called a paragraph. So you want to select the option that says title, and then you just write it like a normal title. So there's different options. Like if you're using Word, for example, you can set headings and paragraphs in Word. So it's the exact same thing there. Does anyone have any other questions on that one before we move on? Brilliant. And this is going to briefly touch on color. Color is really important. So a good question. Thank you, Jennifer. I'm going to just nip back to that. So what is the difference between resizing and optimizing? So resizing is you're taking the image, which is say this big, and making it more of an appropriate size for your website. Optimizing is making that file more compressed. So if you imagine the file like a block, and there's kind of like lines scattered throughout this whole block. Sorry, a better example is if you imagine your fridge. I told you I'm all about food. And if you imagine a fridge and you just throw in all your shopping into the fridge, you don't stack it nicely and neatly, you're not going to fit as much stuff in there as if you kind of order it and stack it very neatly in your fridge. So what optimizing does is it takes that file information and it stacks it nicely and neatly so that you can, and that'll reduce your file size there. And now my belly is rumbling, but hopefully that answers your question there, Jennifer. If you do have any other questions about that, or if anybody else does, feel free to reach out to me after the session. So I know it's a lot to take in. I want to show you a really fun tool. It's called coolers.co. Chuck me a reaction online if you guys have used this before. It's a really good tool. I myself, even though I'm a designer, I'm really bad with color theory, and this does all the hard work for me. You can actually get access to templates, color templates here. So you just click that button and it'll give you a load of templates which you can use for your own website to give you some ideas. Or you can use the generator tool and you come into it here and you just hit spacebar and that will give you random colors. So say you're doing a food business and your color scheme is purple. So you like this purple here. You can actually click the padlock, it will save that. And then you continue hitting spacebar till you find other colors that you like. And you just repeat that process. And that'll quite quickly create you a color scheme that you could use for your website. So you could use this color scheme for your website, for example. Now, what I really like about this is you can see here we've got an alphanumeric code just at the bottom here. And this is what we call a hex code, which is the language these page builders use to pull up this color. So all we would do is we click this color, we click copy, and then we paste that into our page builder, and it will give us that exact color. So we won't have to faff about and try and find the exact color later. So it's a really fun tool. I use it for a lot of my projects. And that's coolers.co. Thanks, Joe, for popping that in the chat for everyone. Page layout. Now, I want to talk to you about page layout. It is really important. What I would recommend is do some research, look at your competitors, type into Google your industry and see what the trends are out there. Take what they've done and adapt it to your own. Don't copy it, because obviously that's copyright. But take what they're doing well and use that as examples. Now, what I've done here is what we call in the industry a wireframe, and this is step one of designing your website. And this is just a little sketch that you'll draw of your homepage or the page that you're designing, and it can be really simple, just boxes like I've done here. And what that does is it helps you assess at a glance how your website will look. If you just go into it guns blazing and start pulling things in and building it like that, your website will be confusing. It'll take you 5 times as long. So do a bit of research in advance and do some drawings first. Any questions on wireframing?
I just want to say Squarespace is excellent if you want to look for ideas, even if you use them somewhere else.
Brilliant, thank you for that. So I think they have lots of templates, don't they, that you can, yeah. So really good point there, Jennifer. Thank you for that. You could just look on Squarespace. Even if you've decided to go for WordPress or Wix or Shopify, see what website template looks good and just adapt it to your own style. I'm going to talk about some of the things that we want to see appearing on our web page as well. And this isn't a one size fits all. It could be very different for every industry individually. So this is just an example of wireframe that I've sketched, and you can just draw this on a piece of paper. It doesn't have to be a neat thing. It's for your own reference. We've got the menu at the top, and then the first thing you want to see is something that we like to call the hook. And this is the most important part of your website page. Now, the hook is the first thing that your visitors will see when you go to that website. The reason it's so important is because you have around 3 seconds to captivate that visitor, or you'll lose them. Again, people are lazy, people are busy, they don't want to waste time. And what Google actually does is Google actually tracks how long a visitor spends time on your page. So it's thrown up your web page as a result, and that visitor has clicked onto the link and they've gone onto your website. Instantly, straight away, a timer will start, and Google will track how many seconds that user is on your page. And if they leave and go away, they'll terminate the timer. And that's what we call bounce rate. And what you want is you want to have a low bounce rate score, which will tell Google that when it offers your website up to that user, that was the right choice for that search. So you're reconfirming to Google that, okay, it referred you, it offered you up, and the visitor stayed for some time. So they looked and explored around your website. So it knows that was a good choice, and it will make that choice again in the future. So in the hook, we want to put things like offers, discounts, click to go to our store, all of those kind of things we want to put in there. What is the purpose of your website? If it is to sell products, we want a big button right at the top that says, click here, go to our store, we're running a 20% sale. And you'll see that across a lot of websites. So important is always the hook at the top. I'm going to skip right down to the bottom. At the bottom, you want to have a call to action. And this is an instruction to tell your visitors to do something. People are lazy, people are impatient. I am myself, I know. And we need to instruct people to do things. I was supporting a client who set up, who was doing Facebook videos, and she grew her Facebook following, and she came back to me and she was like, Simon, no one is buying my stuff. I've got like, 500 followers or whatever, but no one's going through to my website. So I looked at her videos, and straight away the videos were great, but there was no call to action. So all she needed was at the end of that video to go, if you want to buy this product or you want to learn a bit more about my services, click the link below and go to my description. That's a call to action, an instruction to do something. And the reason we put that right at the bottom is because if we are lucky enough and our website is interesting enough and people have made it all the way to the bottom, then let's tell them to go to the next step in that journey rather than, they get to the bottom and they go, okay, well, what now? I'll just leave and go back to Google. So if they get to the bottom, let's put a call to action in there. It could be a contact form for them to reach out to you. It could be a 5% discount if you sign up, on our subscription service, those kind of things. So right at the top, we have the hook, and then right at the bottom, we have this call to action. Now, everything that appears in the middle is all interchangeable, okay? So you could include things like features about your business. It could be your top 5 selling products. It could be that you are eco-friendly, those kind of selling points about your brand. You want to have an incentive navigation. So as I mentioned, as soon as someone goes on your website, straight away a timer starts. And what we want to do is we want to make them navigate further into our website, because Google will see that and Google will go, that was the right answer. I'm going to offer this website up to someone else again. We want to include maybe something about our company, some information there. So these are all kind of things that we can include in that, and look what other websites are doing well, and take what they're doing well and adapt it to your own design. So the most important bit is the hook at the top to captivate them, to hook them, reel them in. And then the bit at the bottom is that call to action. Here's Elementor, which I mentioned earlier. They have free and paid for options. The course that we provide shows you how to use that. There's loads of videos and tutorials there. They have the free option and a paid for option. One of the plugins that we recommend gives you access to some of the programs similar to what you would get in the paid for option without you needing to kind of pay for that upgrade. So it gives you access to premium features. I've just seen Adam's put a really good one in the chat there. Thank you, Adam. A button to kind of call now can be very handy for people using mobile devices, because many of us will use that. And that's a really good one. It can have, they literally, a button, they click it and it starts ringing on the phone. So a really good example there of a call to action. I guess a literal call to action. And then once you've designed the page, you want to make sure that you understand how all of these pages link together. So think about how visitors would explore your website, how they would move from the home page to the contact us to the shop. And you want to make sure that all your pages have links linking to them, and websites and pages linking to them. And doing this helps us identify what we call orphan links or orphan pages. And these are pages that don't have anything linking to them. So you want to create this kind of spider web of this journey that our visitors can explore and kind of flow through to different parts of our website. And then finally, which we've touched upon quite a few times, the last thing you do once you've built your website is you want to make sure it's responsive for mobile devices. And people always forget this. They do a really good website, it looks amazing, and then they publish it, they go live, and off they go. And then people, 54% of people, 55% of people view that website on mobile, and it looks awful. It's all over the place. So when choosing a page builder, make sure at the end you format it for mobile. And again, the course goes through that for you guys if you choose to use WordPress. So that's just a really quick whistle stop through through the things that you need to consider and some tips and tricks. Before we kind of go on to further aspects, and I can see everyone's brains a little bit fried, so thank you for staying on till the end. Does anyone have any questions or things that they would like to maybe learn a little bit about that we haven't covered in the webinar? Yes, Jennifer.
Sorry, I heard that sigh before my name. Yeah, a couple of things.
Yep.
The first is, so I reside in the UK.
Mhm.
Business is international, so I've purchased domain names with more than one extension.
Mhm.
So like I have a .com, a .ca, a .co.uk, and a .org. How do you point them all in the right direction?
Good question.
The second question is questions about how much what you need to do with that domain name to protect your legal ownership of it in terms of, do I need to trademark it, copyright it? If it's outside of the scope of this, happy just have you point me in the right direction.
Sure. So I'll answer the second one first because it's a bit shorter, and then we'll come back to your first question. So protection and copyright. Unfortunately, I'm not trained as a copyright expert, so it's very difficult for me to give you advice with that. So I would talk to someone and reach out to someone about that. However, if you purchase your domain name through whoever you've purchased it, as long as you keep up payments on that domain, no one else can use that domain name. It is unique to your business. They can have certain adaptions on it, but that specific domain is completely yours. With copyright and those other kind of aspects, that I guess that's a bit more of business support, and maybe that's a conversation I can do a bit of research alongside you offline, and we can maybe talk about that. So if you are in the UK, you can apply to access some of Forward's enterprise support services. So just scroll back to the top of the chat. There's a little link there that you can make your application. Maybe we could pick that up offline. When you're talking about your domain names, and you've bought several, which is a really good strategy, what I would do is, it's a technique called parking your domain. So I would talk to your web host, and what you do is you park that domain so that when people type that domain name in, it will redirect them to your main one where your website lives. So it's a really good technique there. And you can do that through your A record, and I'll talk to your web host because they'll be able to explain what that is in a bit more detail. And it's just a number, like an IP address, and you key that in. So they should be able to talk you through that process. But what you're looking for is how to park that domain so that it will redirect it to your main domain name.
Fabulous. Thank you. That helps with both. My last question is, are you going to be able to point us towards some resources that are sort of the second workshop? You know, like, how do I create a call me button or a call now button? How do I create forms and insert them onto the page? Like some of the real, this has been awesome. Thank you very much for, getting my head in the game. But I'm also looking for some really tactical things that just overwhelm me as somebody in lived experience. It's really easy to say enough for the next 3 years and wait and pick it back up again.
Yeah. So the if you choose to go down sorry, let me restart that question. So every single page builder has a different way of doing it, unfortunately. So I'd say the first step is decide which page builder is the right one for you. If you decide WordPress, then the course that I'll share the link just now, whilst we're answering these questions to save a bit of time, because I'm also mindful that Tom would like to do his presentation. So I've just sent the enrollment link there. So if you guys do want to sign up, feel free. So that will guide you through it. However, if you do want to join Forward Enterprise Services, we can also, which I regularly do with some of my clients, set little micro support sessions where you can go off, build your website and go, right, okay, I'm really struggling with this bit, Simon, and we can do a quick screen share together and talk through those steps.
Can I just interrupt very quickly, Simon? You've raised a really, really good point. I suppose a question I have for you is, should somebody such as Jennifer be interested in taking the next steps and creating and designing and building their own website. Is this something that forms part of our service, our support service? And it's not obviously just, I would say that I wouldn't particularly be happy with somebody just receiving support on just how to build a website. We've got so much more to our game than that. But is that something that you could kind of support on as part of someone's journey with us?
Yeah, really good point to raise there, Tev. So I would like to, if I took you on as a client that I supported, I would need to see that you are looking for kind of business support as a whole. And one of the aspects of my support can definitely be around helping you build a website. And a lot of the page builders are very similar. So if you don't choose one of the ones that we've mentioned, we can definitely work on that together. What I do have to be mindful of is my time. So I can't physically sit with you and build, the whole website together. It would be a case of maybe the tricky bits we could do together, and then other sections I can say, right, this is the bit that you need to go off and read about. So that kind of independent learning as well. Brilliant. So I'm going to come to Keisha next, because she was, I think, next.
Thank you, Simon. Enjoying the call so far. I just really wanted to ask you, is there a difference between a website and a landing page?
Good question. And I regularly have this debate with people. So a website is a website that you can navigate throughout. You've got this journey that people go through and explore. Whereas a landing page is a page built with a specific functional reason, and your users can't navigate away from it. So a good example of a landing page is a contact form to sign up to get access to like an ebook or something like that you're doing, and you would market that page. So the function of that page is to generate email leads. So that's the difference between a landing page and a website. A website explains the overall brand and everything that's going on. And, if you've got an e-store on there as well, those kind of things. Whereas a landing page is a page with one specific function, and that could be to capture emails. It could be to sell us one specific product, but the user can't navigate anywhere else from that page. So they'll go on that page and it forces them to either buy or sign up. They can't explore any further.
If one was to do a landing page, can they upgrade from a landing page to a website? Is it easier to do it that way?
Depends on your host. If you're Wix, Squarespace, Shopify, all of those, they may have cheaper plans for landing pages. But I imagine they both all work similar to open source like WordPress, where that landing page, you could then just turn into a website page by adding a menu at the top, which would then allow people to navigate, or buttons that link to other pages in your website.
Okay, brilliant. And finally, you did mention about the slug. So you've got the domain name and the slug at the very end.
Yep.
Do you pay for the slug? Do you pay per slug, a money per slug?
So again, different hosts may have different terms. The general rule of thumb is you pay for the size of memory that you have for your website. So, if you've got a 5 gigabytes worth of website memory, you can use that until it's full. However, when you get into about 80% capacity, you need to upgrade because it will slow your website down. So on that server, you can have as many website pages. You can potentially, depending on the terms and conditions, have as many websites as well. So you could have 5 different websites with like 20 pages each. So there doesn't tend to be limits like that.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you so much, Simon.
Thank you. Next on my list is Jake.
Thanks a lot, Simon. Really good to spend the last hour with you and others. Thank you for all the links. I want to steer, I suppose. About 4 years ago, I wanted a website, so I did a free month with Squarespace, and then I did a free month with Wix. And I found, because of whatever reason, maybe it's neurodiversity, maybe it's just how I learn and how I respond, I've got incredibly frustrated. And then I gave £100 to a friend of my mum's to build me a site, which happened. And it's still there, but I haven't paid any more since. And this is about 4 years ago. She decided she didn't want to do it anymore. So a friend of my sister's, I mean, it's all in the family, offered to take it on board. I have no idea how that happens. This friend adapted it, and it still looks terrible. And I wonder whether you should steer me towards taking it back myself, or given I'm 53, I'm not computer literate, and I struggle to put the time in and get the rewards or the results that I'm looking for. Should I pay somebody to do that, which I'd like to do, but of course limited resources? Just ideas really on that. Thank you.
Yeah, so that's an interesting one, and like you said, it comes down to funds, you know, and how much capital you have to pay someone. If you're struggling with digital, I'd maybe consider it, and also if you're short for time as well, because you've got to think as an entrepreneur, how much time are you going to consume building this website when you could be earning money? So that's one aspect that you need to kind of consider. If you are looking to take out someone's services, I would always ask them for a portfolio, so examples of websites they've built in the past, so that you can understand their skill level. Because there's no point in paying someone to do a design if their design skills are poor. So again, that's something to consider. What I like to do with my clients before I start building the website itself is that I will make a mock-up of what the website looks like. So I could do that on Photoshop or Illustrator, and I'll email that to the client, and then the client can make any changes and adaptations to that initial design. But that's kind of down to the individual design aspects and what they're comfortable with. But I would definitely think, can you do it yourself? Do you have the capacity? If not, and you've got the finances, do a bit of research. Fiverr, you can get some really cheap website designs built. You can look at other examples that they've built in the past and try and ask them before they start building if they will do your mock-up first, just for you to look at. And that may be a case of you paying a deposit initially, but at least then you've not lost that whole sum of money by paying them up front before they start building.
Can I just add something about that? In particular, in response to Jake's question, I think for me, and Simon raises really, really important points about time versus earning money versus digital abilities. I think one of the issues when I had my own business was that I outsourced it, paid for it, but then I found that I started to suffer a lack of control. So every time I wanted to update an image or add something, I had to keep going back to the original website builder to deal with that for me because of my lack of understanding. And that's when things can become a bit costly, or even more so frustrating, because that web builder is not prioritizing you for whatever reason or what have you. So, I mean, I suppose it makes sense if we are all able to do it and have the time and the skill to do it ourselves, because then that gives us complete control of how we want to update, change, etc., etc. Paying for someone, yes, it takes that headache away, but then it creates other headaches in the long term in terms of making updates and changing even some really small things like an image or changing the price of a product. Can you imagine that every time you want to do that, you've got to go back to your web builder and ask him to or her to do that, which I imagine will attract cost and delays. So that's my my comment on that.
Brilliant, thank you, Tev. And just to kind of build on that as well. That's why maybe some of the asking your web designer or web developer before they start building, what page builder are they going to be using as well, is an important one. Because if they're going to be using Wix, Squarespace, that's going to be relatively easy for you to learn about and edit, make those minor changes. But if they're going to be doing it from hard coding, using HTML, JavaScript, those kind of things, there's no chance that you're going to be able to edit that without a lot of technical skill. So making those decisions before you start buying or services is also really important.
Simon, in terms of questions, we've got loads on the chat. I'm just wary of your time, so I'm not sure how you want to play this. So
okay, so maybe one more, and then what I'll try to do is export the chat, and I'll reply to you guys via email if you're happy with that. Tev, would you mind picking one on chat for me? And I can, because I can't quite see it at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's only fair that we go with the first one.
Yeah.
And that was, Adam, no, excuse me, it was Sam. He actually raised a really good point. He said, does Apple's website use its evolving scrolling graphics to exploit Google's SEO and analytics somehow?
Okay, so that's an interesting one. So I see what you mean about that kind of scrolling aspect. What potentially is happening on that page is with kind of scrolling effects, they are much more visually interesting. So from a user experience perspective, users are going to associate more with that and stay on it and continue. And if they continue staying on that page, then Google will note that, will recognize that, which means you'll get a better SEO score. There could be also applying other techniques, which we would call lazy loading. And what that does is it means that the website is only loading what you can physically see on the screen. And then as you scroll, it starts loading the next bit and the next bit, and it makes your website load a lot quicker. Unfortunately, I'm not too familiar with the Apple website itself. So, I can maybe do a bit of research and let you know, but I'd imagine it's more focused around user experience and engagement, which in turn will give you a better SEO score. So it will benefit you with Google. So hopefully that answered your question. We've got about, I think probably about another 10, 15 minutes, 20 minutes to the end of the session. So what I'm going to do now is, if the people that haven't come round to on video, if you wouldn't mind just popping your question in chat, and then I'll try to kind of respond to all of them after the session. So apologies for that, but it's really good to see everyone engaging. And I'd just like to quickly discuss the micro grants before handing over to Tom, who's going to do a quick interest piece around VR and then talk to us a bit more about Fuse. So as mentioned earlier, we have a micro grant fund, which is a limited fund. So we've got a pocket of money that the Forward Trust has ring fenced that we would like to allocate to entrepreneurs that we support in our program and our pathway. Sorry, I just saw Keisha's hand up then. I thought it was a question. And what we're trying to do with this is remove as many barriers as possible for individuals starting up their own businesses. So these could be things like, startup costs like tools, machinery, vehicles. It could be marketing that you want to spend that on, training costs, those other kind of things there. It's not an exhaustive list, but it's just to give you guys a bit of flavor. But what we would like to see from you guys to kind of access this grant funding pocket or to apply for it is a business plan, is a financial plan. And bear in mind, when you're writing a business plan, we all really want to see evidence of all of these claims that you're making. So if you're saying you've got, this big customer and it's going to come off, but you need this startup money to help you do that, we would expect to see evidence. So we would want to see maybe email correspondence, things in writing, so that we know that it's, it's moving in the right direction. So just bear that in mind when you're writing your business plan. How do you back up the questions that you're asking here? And so what we do is we'll get all of these applications in, and myself and also my colleague Stephen can help you write your business plan as part of our support at the Forward Trust. And then we get these applications in, they'll be reviewed by an award body, and they'll want to again see all of this evidence. And then if you're successful, we would then allocate you that £1,000, and you can then start using that to get your business going. So hopefully that covers most of the information there. But what we're trying to do is make the application process as simple as possible. Sorry, my phone just went off. As simple as possible. But we do want to see that evidence beforehand. So I'll quickly show you what the course looks like. I know we're limited for time. So this is just the back end of the course so that you can get a bit of an overview. If you guys have signed up with the link, you should automatically get access to this. So you just sign in, go to your account page, and there'll be kind of a bit of an introduction, There'll be a really cheesy short video of me talking you through the steps. I tend to do like a bit of an introduction, explaining everything, and then we'll do the step together on screen. So the point is you do a bit, pause it, do that task on your website, and then carry on playing. And then at the bottom, it'll have the text and screenshots to guide you through that whole process as well. So if you prefer watching videos, it's got that option, and if you prefer learning from text and screenshots, it has that option too. So that's the end of my presentation today. I would like to thank you all. I'm just going to hand over to Tom to give us some interest piece topics to talk around and also mention Fuse.
Cheers, Simon. Great listening to that. The enterprise team always offer me to just join for my section when I do a talk on these events, but I always try to stay for the whole of it because there's always a lot of interesting information. Might be glad to hear now. I think there was so much great stuff in there and kind of practical points. This part, my little presentation here, not going to be quite like that. It's going to be much more top line. Much more kind of ideas. So yeah, I'll hopefully ask you to kind of give your detail focused action mind a break and maybe engage your sort of more creative side of your mind. Here, basically, the reason I say that is because I'm not a VR expert, so to speak. The reason Simon and the team asked me to do a presentation here is because I was recently asked by Forward to, as part of a general audit of our digital services, to look at how we might be able to incorporate virtual reality and or augmented reality into our services. And that was a slightly daunting task. It was like, well, what, we work with people. What's VR got to do with that? But we found once we kind of did a lot of research that there are some really interesting possible uses. Stuff like mindfulness for our clients who are in recovery, VR mindfulness, simulating triggers, for clients in treatment for addiction, sort of simulations of real world situations for people who have maybe been in prison for many years. So some really interesting stuff we came up with, and I basically want to try and similarly get your mind flowing, and you might not come straight out of this session with any specific actions or ideas, but maybe a few months down the line you'll see an opportunity and think of this session, think, maybe I could actually use VR for this. So I'm now gonna start my presentation and share my screen. Simon, I can see I'm not the host. I know you've got my presentation there somewhere. Either you can make me the host and I'll share it, or you can share it.
You should have screening rights now, Tom. Sharing rights.
Very much. Shared screen. This one. Great. Hopefully you can all see my my PowerPoint presentation here. Basically, to get started, first of all, I think we need to start from the beginning and say, what is VR? Briefly overview what it actually means. So virtual reality, it's described as a simulated experience. It's all encompassing and fully immersive. It's usually created, that experience, via a VR headset, which is like what you see on your left here, on that picture on the left. Just going to make this full screen. So it basically allows you to interact with or explore a computer-generated simulation. So unlike old styles of seeing stuff on a screen, this actually lets you interact with a digital or virtual world around you. That differs from AR, augmented reality, which is another term you might have heard, and some people, I think, quite fairly get confused between the two. Augmented reality, you can kind of you see a real world setting around it. So it might be like you look down the street with your phone and you can see some virtual things on the street, but you can also see the street, if you see what I mean. Whereas with VR, everything around you is digital and virtual. Hopefully that kind of shows you that. VR, what I thought when I was first briefed to look into it, it's just for gaming, isn't it? Right? It's just an interesting way for gaming, and it is used for video games. And I guess it provides sort of an update on the most realistic graphics that you could get on video games. The modern video games, they've got them more and more realistic, and I guess VR is a way for them to be even more realistic, so you actually feel like you're in the world that the game is trying